We'd just like to thank Optimizely for the live video streaming. They're sponsoring us for that part of it. And if you go and check out the video stream, there's a link there where you get a free offer to use that software. So thanks, Gerard, for coming in tonight. Gerard's got a wealth of experience in the marketing space. Works with some massive multinationals in the UK and in Australia, as well as running a number of startups here in Brisbane. What was it you were saying earlier? It's like, with the big companies, it's like from 100 to 1, getting that extra 1%.
Yeah, and then for startups, it's going from 0 to 1. So I get a kick out of going from 0 to 1 because that's a bigger change than going from 100 to 101. So that's what I tell myself when I don't have big clients with big budgets. So hopefully that works today.
Yeah, so I'll hand over to Gerard. Thanks, man.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm a marketing guy, which means, and I've done a lot of work in agencies, which means I like slides. So, but they're usually pretty simple. So bear with me. What I'm going to try to do is try to come from my marketing point of view, hopefully give you something that works in terms of product and how we can take innovative and new products to market and get people to buy it, because people are naturally adverse to taking on new ideas. So to start with these brands, and I do that because most people have an aversion to risk. They don't want to fail, right? So people are sort of like, when there's a new idea, a new product, people don't want to try it because if it goes wrong or they made the wrong decision, they retrospectively look back and go, oh, I shouldn't have done that, that was a mistake. And that's one of the main reasons why people don't adopt new ideas. So I put a cred slide up like this, not just for my own ego, but it's so you can say, hey, if all these brands trusted Gerard, then he probably knows something about marketing. So that's the reason why I put it there. Also, if I've worked with H&M and Burberry and I dress like I do, I probably know something about marketing. So to kick off, I thought I'd talk about one of the most popular sayings people talk about when you're talking about innovation, because people say it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I love this expression because the thing about sliced bread was when it came out in the 1920s, people hated it. And so the greatest innovation that we talk about, I know it's probably not, but it's the thing that we say, actually no one liked because they were worried that it might be floppy, it might fall over. And I like this analogy because not just because of what we use, but the story that goes behind it. The reality was that, so sliced bread didn't work. People didn't like it, people weren't buying it. And the guy who founded it and had the first bread slicing machine and the second one, because the first one broke really quickly, he actually had a better invention, which was the little bread tie that we still use today, which is that little plastic clip we put. He put that on the end of the packet to give the people the idea they could hold their loaves together strongly. But for me as a marketer, it didn't really work until they attached brands to it. Until they started advertising, until they started selling the benefits of why they'd use it rather than. And so in the 1940s, during the Second World War, America decreed that any steel-based machinery, if it wasn't for the law, was illegal. And so bread slicing machines were outlawed. And so even though they'd finally got the greatest thing invented into market, people loving it, the whole world can work against you and your innovation can actually fail. So I do that as a bit of comfort. So if you do have a great product and it fails as good as sliced bread, sometimes the world work against you. So what does a market look like and how does everyone play out? A lot of you are probably familiar with Roger's sort of adoption of innovation curve. Everything in the world fits on a curve, right? This is why people do masters. And, you know, product innovation and adoption is no different. The reason why it's important is if you're building a new product, if you're designing something and you want someone to take it on board, what you want to avoid doing is you don't want to spend your marketing effort hitting all the people at the same rate. The reason is in any given market, there will be laggards. There'll be people who absolutely hate whatever the new idea is, and there'll be people who love it. What you've got to do as if you're on a marketing role or working with marketers, is you've got to try to focus your effort on the innovators and the early adopters. The innovators are the people that will take on your product and try it even though it doesn't work. The early adopters will take it on because it works, but most people aren't on board. And this is true of everything that you do. For example, my music taste is probably somewhere in the late majority. I've been to one concert in 3 years, it was Ed Sheeran. You know, so I'm not exactly at the cutting edge of music. But I have had a paid Spotify account. So I adopt technology really readily. So I've had a paid Spotify account since I think about 12 or 13 years ago, and I got it when I was in Sweden. And so even in the same genre of music, people will fall on different sides of this curve. And what I want, one of the key things I want for you guys to take away is the goal for you when you're launching a new product is to find the early adopters. Because what happens in any market is you win the innovators and the early adopters, and they drag each section through with them until eventually the laggards come on board. And what you don't want to do is try to approach everybody. So even if you do something great, like write Harry Potter as a story, and you put it out onto Amazon and people start buying it, 17% of the people in the first 6 months on Amazon reviewed Harry Potter, the first novel, with 1 star. That's these people over here. They didn't like it. Over time, they get drawn into it by everybody else, and then they start to like it because they can see what it is. So, don't be put off by people not adopting new ideas, by not liking new products. People are naturally against innovation. They don't like change. It's how we evolve as a species, is by learning from our past mistakes. And so when you do something new and you change it, it's going to be hard to get people to do it. The other key point here is, and there's a great book, Crossing the Chasm, is there's this inflection point, and lots of new ideas can get fairly easily to the first 16% of a market, but that next jump into the early adopters is always the hard part. And so, talk about products and innovation, they start slow, and it's really slow to get that. If you can jump that chasm and you get into the mainstream market, that's usually the point where you've got real product market in whatever you're trying to put out there into the world, so to speak. So, the way I imagine this working is, and if anyone's ever been in theatre or likes the theatre or they've got family in theatre, is there's an expression in Australia which is chukkers. So if you're going to have an opening night, we say chukkers, and chukkers means good luck. And it comes about from the Australian slang sort of adoption of the idea that if your first night, your opening night goes well, then you get to eat a roast chicken, because theatre shows typically get closed. If you bomb on your first night, you're not going to get a second night. And that's because the theatre industry, the arts, recognise that if the innovators and the early adopters, the people who turn up to a show before anyone else has reviewed it, before anyone else has said that it's good, they turn up because they love the theatre. If they hate it, then you're never going to get up that curve. And so there's, it's a nice expression. If you're ever going to the theatre, you see someone performing, you can say chukkers and they'll think you know something about theatre. The other thing is, and just for what it's worth in the theatre industry, in my world of startups, we have angel investors. And interestingly, that term is actually adopted from the theatre world. So original angel investors were the people that would shows, put it into market and see the innovators will take it on board. So I like to think that my love of theatre and my love of startups collide in some way. So I thought what I'd do is do a little exercise with you. Bear in mind, I'm a marketer, I'm a natural introvert, so my things aren't going to be, you're not going to be standing up and falling backwards into my arms or anything. But I've got a little exercise here, and it's hopefully sort of ties in some of the stuff I just spoke about. So what I need you to do is, and I promise you it's not too involved, is to get into pairs. So find somebody that's going to be your partner in this exercise. One person is going to be the tapper. That person is going to get the sheet, and on the sheet there is going to be songs, or there are songs, and you're going to tap the tune to the other person. And the other person, I tap it a few times, the other person is going to listen to that tapping and try to guess what the song is. I've got 10 here. Don't fear. Remember, I only went to an Ed Sheeran concert, so these are not modern songs. You should know at least 5. If you don't know any, there's a cultural issue with the way we're doing it. What I want you to do with the partner is don't give visual clues. Like, don't mouth the answer. Tap it a few times, listen to it. If you can't get it, move on to the next one. We're going to try to move through reasonably rapidly. I want to see how many you get right at the end of it. Does that make sense? Tapping works well if you use a pen or something hard, you do it on the desk. There will be other noise, you're going to have to put up with that. So if you can get into partners, someone who's going to be the tapper, put the hand up, I'll give you the answers. And then, does that make sense to everybody, what you need to do? It's going to take us 3 or 4 minutes, it won't take us very long. So, are you guys a pair? Pairs works best. All right, so who wants to be the tapper? You're the tapper, so you've got the answers. Don't share the answers, obviously. You might hear the other person giving it out. If you've got a pen or something hard or just your finger, that makes sense. Who's going to be doing the tapping? You're doing the tapping, so you're listening. Okay, tapper? Tapper? Don't show the answers. Tapper? Yep. Who's the musician?
Not me, but
yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay, tapper, hands up.
Sure.
Tapper. Tapper.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. Tapper. Okay, great. So just tap the songs out and then do your best to guess what they are. Do you know the songs? Just pick any one, even if you don't know the first couple, and then tap it out, and you've just got to really listen to what the tune is. I was going to say, I can hear your tapping and it's really good. That's the best tapping. I love it. You got the. You've got one? Don't just keep going with the same person. We'll stop in a minute, so we'll do like one more and see how we're going. All right, 30 seconds left and we're going to stop. Try to get those last ones done. All right. Everyone, let's stop. If you haven't got it now, you're probably not going to get it. All right. Who thinks they did pretty well? Who thinks they did pretty well? All right. How many did you get right? Oh, you just got the one. Oh, did anyone do better than one?
We got one, and I didn't tap that one.
You got one and you didn't tap it. Oh, okay, so we've got one real, one cheat, two. Right. So can we agree that was a little bit harder? The people who were doing the tapping, when you looked at the songs, you recognize some of them, right? Pretty basic primary school prep kindy songs, right? We know the tune. When you were tapping it, did you tap it and in your head at the same, did you go, happy birthday to you, right? You sang the song, you tapped it, it was perfect. The person who was listening, what did you hear? A random mess of tapping and some person looking at you like, why the hell can't you understand what I'm doing? It's friggin' happy birthday, right? So the reason why I do this experiment, it's not an experiment, it's just a thing, is it gets this point where you can look at, oh yeah, so give them the answer, tell them what they didn't get. I didn't realise we hadn't revealed it. So now that you've seen some of them, you either, A, you kind of maybe understand what you were hearing before, or B, if you heard it again, you'd guess it straight away because you know the answers. Right, so the thing we're dealing with here is the idea of knowledge, right? It's really hard to explain something to somebody when you're an expert. When you've got all the knowledge and you know exactly why you've done it, why you designed it, why you built it, you're trying to sell it to someone, you're trying to convince them of what it is, and you go insane because you have all the knowledge. And it's a curse because it's really hard to explain something when you have superior knowledge to the person listening. So the goal as a marketer and the goal of anybody who's trying to sell product innovation is to have empathy, right? You have to have empathy with the position they're in. They don't care as much as you probably, what you're selling. They definitely don't have as much domain expertise. And so you're coming with this huge amount of knowledge and trying to sell, when I say sell, I don't mean you have to like on the street selling a product, but in a workplace or anywhere, you've got to convince people. And I just want you to, when next time you're trying to pitch a product or explain to somebody how something works or why they should use it, remember that you couldn't guess row your boat. And so when you're trying to convince them of some elaborate product that you've designed or you're trying to push, it's going to be infinitely harder. And one way that I like to, I guess, challenge you in your workplace, in whatever you're doing, is to think about why someone is correct for not choosing your product. Not why they're wrong, because that's our default position, right? Our empathy doesn't naturally come to most people at that extreme level. So the question is not why someone wrong, because that's easy, right? They're wrong because they don't understand that this is going to change their lives, or it's faster or more efficient, or it's whatever it might be. Why are they right? And if you understand why they're right for not choosing it, one, you've got a better chance of convincing them why of the correct way, or two, you've got a better idea of who your target market is. So that's kind of like the and look, for me as a marketer, empathy is one of the most powerful skills that I can have. And I don't think I'm a naturally empathetic person, but as a marketer, you have to be able to put yourself in the other person's position. So hopefully that translates for you, and hopefully it also You get that feeling in your normal working day of what it is like trying to explain to somebody something that's a little bit more complicated. You've got to have a little bit of empathy of why they might be right. And also understand that the vast majority, 70, 80, whatever it is, 84% of people don't adopt new ideas naturally, being what you're doing. So most people won't like it. The last thing I'll say on that is, it's actually important if you do something that's innovative to have people who don't like it. If you don't have people who don't like it, you're not going to have people who love it. If you don't have people who love it, no one will adopt it. It's just meh. And meh doesn't move. It just stays the same. So if everyone hates what you're doing, okay, that's a problem. But if you can have equal parts of hate and love, then you can start moving in the right direction. There's equal parts of people who hated Uber, who loved it at the start. You can get that traction, the market can move in your direction. So, moving along, I want to talk a bit about the importance of finding your niche and why finding a niche for a market, and again, we've got adopters, but a niche is one of the best ways to get people to adopt a new idea, a new product or an innovation. So this is a picture of a restaurant that I went to in Auckland. Last night, we were in our New Zealand holiday last year with the family, and my kids wanted to go to a Mexican restaurant, because what else do you do when you go to New Zealand on a holiday but you eat Mexican? And so, I said, yeah, we'll do something. So I walked down to reception, kids are dressed, and I asked the person at reception, we'd like to go for a Mexican dinner, where would you recommend? So he's looking at us and he's got to make a suggestion. Now, what I find interesting around this is that he has to make a couple of decisions. He has to sort of say, well, I've already said it's Mexican. I'm obviously at the hotel, so I don't have a car, or I probably don't have a car. I've got my family with me, so I've got 2 small kids, so I don't want to go to a bar necessarily, so it needs to be family friendly. And so he has to recommend something to me. And what's important to me around niche marketing is this idea that he has to recommend what he thinks is best. And best is subjective when you haven't positioned your product correctly, but best is his best guess as to what I want to do. And what I think is really important to understand is he's never going to recommend the second best. And you go, well, it's kind of obvious, but that's why it's important in any market to be the best. If you were going to go out for dinner tomorrow night or on Saturday with some friends and you said, oh, I'd like to, where should we go? And you respond with, let's go to my second favorite restaurant. That's just weird. No one does that. People recommend their favorite restaurant. And so the thing about a niche is a small segment that empowers you to be the best. Now that could be in a market, it could be like a restaurant, but it could also just be a group of people willing to adopt your product or your idea. So the power of a niche is about being the best. So this manifests itself in something called Ziff's law. And Ziff's law I like for a number of reasons. One, I don't like it because I have trouble pronouncing his name. It just doesn't work with my lips for some reason. And also he called it a law and it wasn't really ever a law. He just called it a law and went, yep, it's a law. And because he did that, he actually got all the credit for an idea that somebody else actually did all the work for before. So sort of academic thievery. But anyway, his name's attached to it. So what is Ziff's law? Ziff's law came about with the idea that the winner in any market takes a disproportional share. And he came to this theory because he looked at the, the body of work, Brown's books or whatever it is in the US, and it's a body of work, it's 1 million published pieces, and they said this opus is representative of all the published works in a given year. He took all the words, all the books, and counted all the words up. This is, pre-computers, or proper computers. And he laid all the words out. And he had this epiphany when he was doing that, and he discovered that the word the occurred 7% of the time. In other words, 7% of all the published words in this 1 million volume collection was the word the. And he said, well, that's not overly inventive. And then as he started to calculate everything, he discovered that 50% of the printed words came from only 135 different words. The other 50% was 35,000 words. And he looked at that and said, there's something in this. And he started to then translate this same theory on all markets everywhere, discovering that when you break a market down to a niche, the winner in a market takes a disproportionate slice. And he found that the percentages started to become a bit consistent. And what he came out with was the idea that 30-ish% of a market will often go to a leader, on average. So you've got big markets, there'll be changes. And then he discovered that second place in a market will get about 15 to 17%, about half of the leader. And then third got half of second, fourth got half of third, and he got this logarithmic tail that turned out it matched exactly the way the books and the words went. And what it did is it empowered people to realize that actually, if you want to win, in a market, if you want to get some traction, you've got to be the best in a market. And your job in a market is to make the market small enough so you can be the best. So I might be able to say that I'm, the best marketer at, I don't know, startup marketing or something like that. And it's a small enough niche that you're going to go, well, maybe Gerard is. But if I say I'm the best marketer, that's too big. I'm going to be buried somewhere with the 35,000 other ones that are out there. And people don't recommend, remember, people don't adopt things if they're not the best. And so that's my challenge. Now, the way I'd like to extend this example is to look at Google's click distribution, right? Because it follows exactly Ziff's law. If you're number one in Google, you'll get about 30% of the clicks. If you're number two, you'll get about 15%. Number three, you'll get about 7%, and so on and so forth. And there's a saying in search marketing, it's not that common, but I say it a bit. If you want to bury a body in search marketing, you put it on the second page of Google results because no one ever goes there, right? And you can kind of see this whole thing plays out almost exactly. And this is the best data set of competitive marketing and competitive landscapes we've got anywhere. Because if you need to find the answer to something, you're going to Google it. The only real anomaly is this slight blip that occurs on the second page. Because often people out of desperation will click page 2, look at the top and then just go, oh, no, I'm out of there. So you get a little bit of a bump there. It's just more of a quirk of the way Google works. The only other difference there, of course, is desktop and mobile, bigger screens. But it's really important to recognize that's what your goal's got to be. And I see this fail time and time again. Everyone takes comfort in the idea of I'm going to approach a huge market and it's the 1% fallacy, right? If just 1% of people take my product, but why? Why would that 1% take your product? What you want to do is find a market where you go, I can't see any conceivable reason why 100% of this market's not going to use my product. And that's what you've got to do, and that's what niching does. And then niching gets you at the front of the curve for the adopters, and then you can move your way through the rest of the audience. So using Ziff's law in Google actually it gives you this great way to find a niche product, or find a niche area, or find a niche interest, or desire, or problem. So the way I'm going to sort of give you this example in real life, so I did this presentation for some nutritionists, so this is how I got this example. And I like Lindy's brand because she calls herself the nude nutritionist. She's obviously not nude, but it works well in terms of getting the first clicks. But what Lindy did well is she found a niche and she exploited that niche and became a world authority on it. And what I can do, long story short, is I can see what search keywords and search traffic drive through to her website. So here's some of the keywords that people search for in Google that find her website. And you can see she's written content about those topics. She didn't really know, she just wrote the blogs and then people started to find them. Now what I want to pull out is that section there and just explain to you how niching works and how being at the top in Ziff's law plays out. So with Lindy's website, that top listing, or the one there, is fruit fattening. So that's what people are questioning and she provides the answer. Now, the first number you see here, 200, that's how many people search for that in a month. Not very many. If you go along, you can see the number of visitors who actually came to her site, 71 a month. And that number there, 1, is her position. She ranks number 1. So when you type that into Google, her site appears number 1. There's only 200 people a month searching for it, but she gets 71 of those visitors. If you go to the very next term, which is can't stop eating, 2,000 people a month search for that. Much bigger pond, bigger pie. She only ranks 6th, right? So following Ziff's law, so she's only getting 65 visitors a month. So you've got a pond or a market that's 10 times bigger and yet actually delivers less visitors. And that's a really small example, but this holds true across all Google of why it's important to find those niches. So what I want to give you guys was a couple of tools that you can use post this event that are like free and out there, and ways that you can interrogate the way people's minds work to think about the niche, because it's hard to think about how to niche down. Oh, sorry, I've got some the benefits of niche marketing, but I'll skip through that because it's kind of obvious. So it's the size of your keyword pond that matters, right? We want to go as small as possible. It's not about making a big fish, because that's hard work. It's about actually starting with a small pond, and as your fish gets bigger, then you earn the right to go to a bigger pond. To give you some tools about how to do this, the first and the easiest way is when you go to Google. We've all done this. You start to type something and Google starts to suggest other searches. Those are other examples of searches that people have made. And each time you type, and the more detailed you get, the more detailed the suggestions get. So as you start to type things that relate to the problem that your product should be solving, you get more suggestions and you can find more niche markets to go to. That's nice and well and good, but it's quite laborious to do, and you can imagine quite hard to like write down a notepad. Lucky for us, there's coders out there, and they invent things called keyword shitter. And keyword shitter is a lovely named tool, but it effectively does that same search for you and outputs all the search results. But what's really good about it is it then takes the suggestion and then does the search again, and the third, and does it again, and again, and again. This tool in minutes will spit out tens of thousands potentially of keywords of all crazy sort of searches that people might conduct. Now, a couple things about it. Just because it's in there doesn't mean it's a good niche. Secondly, you get a really weird insight to the way humans think. As you get deeper into this search, there are some crazy things that people search for. I used to work for a search engine, and if you ever want to have fun on a Friday work drinks, just open up the search logs and start looking at the crazy things that people search for. And put the adult filter on, because that's just pure scary if you don't. The other way to go up is to find whole new trends, so using Google Trends. That gives you a way to sort of find other keywords. So if I'm looking at vegan diets, I might look at, say, vegan keto diets. And that gives you other ideas. That's very macro, and so that's sort of about finding a whole other area and then going back to another tool like on the previous page and drilling down again. This tool, Answer the Public, if you go to the website, it's kind of a bit creepy. It's got a guy's head and he'll move around, he'll stare at you. Get past that screen. It's a really interesting UX they've got there. But if you put in a keyword like vegan diets, it'll spit out a whole bunch of queries. But it clumps the queries based around questions. And as humans, we're better at responding to questions than we are just hanging random keywords. So you can see it'll be like, so in the why collection, it'll say why vegan diets are bad, why vegan diets are good, amazingly, why vegan diets are dangerous, why vegan diets are healthy. And you sort of get this sense, you go, oh, okay, I can position myself around one of those questions. The last thing I'd say, and last tools, Word Tracker, WordStream, there's a whole bunch of tools that play in this space, is it's all well and good finding a niche, but your goal is to find the minimum viable market for you. And a viable market means there has to be somebody searching for it. It's enough that you can get some kind of traction. So these tools will combine both the search volume and the competitiveness. And what you're trying to do with that competitiveness is work out, like, if there's two people searching for it and it's really competitive, you don't play in that space. So you're trying to find a viable market that you can actually carve out a niche in and that you can be the best. So I'll make sure I share these slides too, so you can find those URLs. But I think it's important, and you can use Google because it's basically the biggest data set or potential data set of consumer demand and problems out there. And it gives you a really good insight into what people are searching for and what their problems are. So I'm going to quickly touch on growth marketing and give you, towards the end of it, I'll give you a spreadsheet that you can use, kind of conceptualize how you actually go about working out the right marketing tactics to use. So growth marketing, what and how? So this is Sean Ellis's definition, which is a growth hacker or a growth marketer is a person whose true north is growth. Everything they do is scrutinized by its potential impact on scalable growth. And so sort of started to explode because people wanted to grow at all costs. And look, their market is, they're not necessarily better or worse, they're just a different type of marketer. But what it meant was, and for me personally, growth marketers became marketers that thought beyond just acquisition. So up until a certain point, marketers had always been about the top of the funnel. Let's just put more people in the store, more people buying, more people trying. Like it was all top of the funnel, get attention. And then it was the rest of the company's job to deliver the product behind that and deliver on the promise. And there's a massive disconnect there. So I used to work at ad agencies. Ad agencies were often tasked with just getting attention, just getting people into a store, and then the company would then try to do it. Like make the sale. You end up with a bit of a fight. You're basically saying, oh, the quality of the traffic to the website was low, or, you know, and it's us and them. Growth marketers changed that and started to think about the entire ecosystem, also the entire journey or life cycle of a customer. And one of the ways that's manifested itself is in this cohort analysis. And growth marketers spend all their time, and Louise will talk about like SaaS marketing, like retention of customers is now one of the crucial aspects of a growth marketer. And so we'll do these cohort analysis. And a cohort analysis basically, cohorts, so people based on the time that they started using a product, down this axis here, and then the time that they've been using it across the top. And naturally, you're going to have a decay, right? People are going to drop off using a product. But the important thing about cohort analysis is, for the growth marketer, is they're now assessed on whether people not only sign up, but whether they continue to use the product. And what that means is a growth marketer can't work in isolation. They can't just bombard a web page with a whole lot of visitors. They can't just buy a whole lot of ads and say they've had brand engagement. They actually have to deliver visitors that are going to convert and stay with the product. And that means you start to create growth teams. And growth teams mean you've got products and you've got engineers and people working together. And so, you know, when you look at something like this, you want to see some consistency. And what it does is rather than looking at macro numbers and saying, oh, how many people have I driven to the top of the funnel? We're really looking at how much are they worth over time, to the lifetime value. And so for me, it's important that these teams work together. And that's, I'll get onto that in a second. The last thing about that is in that definition around the North Star. And we use this phrase a lot. But it's this idea that a North Star metric is the single metric that best captures the core value that your product delivers to customers. And for me, this is the great point where product and marketing ties together, because the marketer, the growth marketer, then becomes completely driven around that. And I'll give you an example. If I was at Uber and I was a traditional marketer, I would simply say, I just need to get people to download the app. If I get them to download the app, the product guys have to deliver an app and a service and product that actually delivers what I've said. And that's a huge disconnect. Growth marketers would say, actually, my metric for success is the number of dual 5-star rides. So not the amount of money I make, not the revenue, not the profit, not the length of the journey. It's about the number of times where a driver and a passenger both give 5-star reviews, because that will lead to more usage, which will ultimately lead to more revenue and more profit. And that's what a growth marketer does. And that's why a growth marketer now becomes completely focused around talking to the product team. And so a growth marketer will have this set of metrics that they measure themselves by. And it's called, Dave McClure coined the phrase pirate metrics, because R, and you kind of go acquisition, activation, retention, referral, and revenue. And you put revenue at the bottom because that's not the primary driver. Actually, probably the two most important is activation and retention. And that's where everyone puts their effort and that's where they focus. And you can see when you break that down, it's kind of gone beyond. Like as a digital marketer, that's what I did in the 2000s. I was focused on acquisition and activation. But as a growth marketer now, I'm worried about retention, referrals, and revenue. So you can see it's entirely through the product range. But I can't, as a marketer, turn up and start to dictate and sort of pretend like I'm the CEO of the entire company, everything revolves around me. I need a team sport. And so I need to build a growth team. And you'll hear marketers try to assemble these things because they've got their metrics. And that's why you'll have someone from product and you'll get someone in data and engineering, and they try to put a team together, because the growth marketer is just part of that team. And more now, marketing doesn't sit outside and just drop people into the front of a shop or the front of a website or down a business to focus on lifetime value. So I want to give you guys a framework that you can work with marketing, what we should be doing with our marketing. And this is a very simple growth process, but the basic steps are, to ideate a marketing idea, prioritize it, design it, execute, and then analyze it. And a marketer can't do this in isolation because they don't understand usually how much time and effort might go or how feasible something is to do. So just quickly touching on each of these so you get an idea. They're pretty simple concepts. Ideation, we all get that. We come up with a whole bunch of random ideas of how we might market a product. 2, we've got to prioritize these. And this is like an ICE scoring system. And this is really important. This is about measuring, you're basically weighting all ideas around the impact, the confidence, and the ease. So the impact being is, if this marketing idea is true, how great an impact is this going to have on the business? The confidence, obviously, how confident are we that this is going to work? And the ease, how easy is this going to be to implement? And what we do is we give everything a score out of 10, and we divide it by 3, and we get our answer. 1, it's simple. It is subjective, which means it's not based in pure data, but it makes it really easy to weigh one option off against another. So what I mean by that, so one variable off against another. So something that might be you're really confident is going to work might be really hard to do. Something that might have great impact could be hard to do. And so these tend to play off against each other. But what we're trying to do is avoid the problem where we go off on crazy ideas that are really hard to do, which might have no impact if they're right. And hopefully we go after the easy wins that will have some impact and we're confident will work. So it's a prioritization. They typically manifest with. It's important that the marketer designs the experiment. Marketers are terrible at designing experiments typically. So this is where someone with an actual product background guide them through this process. simply because we're not that scientific. We tend to just sort of throw shit against the wall and see what works. But what we need to do is actually set the goal before we do it, because we're very good, typically if we come out of agency land, at selling the results as being positive after the effect, after the fact. The thing about the execution, and we might come up with some ideas after this, is that execution is all about the minimum execution. Most people have real trouble isolating exactly what they're testing, and they tend to come up with a too grandiose way of doing something. And so I'd always challenge you when you come up with a marketing idea for a product of analyze and come. What to do was work with you guys. I'm just going to check the time actually. I wanted to get, now to make this work, one thing you can do, we can either talk about products that you have or companies, or alternatively, you can come up with, we can come up with a single product. We all come up with ideas, or an existing company. So I don't know if someone's got a particular product or company or idea, or we'd like to come up with ideas. It could be Uber, it could be a political thing. But basically what you're doing is you're just picking a business, hopefully an innovative business, is that we can work. And then as a group, we basically come up with ICE scoring. So I want everyone to sort of sit there and come up with the idea of, does someone have an idea? Okay, and it's a cream for?
2 years research. It started its life offering set by its business.
Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do is, what we're going to do is, oops, hang on, let me just.
Okay, so now would be a good time to split into teams.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll probably go for 4 teams. So if we just want to count off, are you going to be in, James? Okay. So, sorry, Brian, can you start with 2,
3, 4.
3. Okay, so let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. I hope you remember your number. Whatever your number was, that's 1, 2, 3, 4.
4, yeah?
Yeah.
So if anyone's got a computer, you can download the spreadsheet. You can there's a URL at the bottom there, and you can just get access to that Google Sheet if you'd like to work from structure. If you don't, I'll put it back on the screen. You can just copy the data.
Who's over there?
So it doesn't matter, or you can just load up. You just follow the link at the bottom. I would recommend to make a copy of it, because if you all start editing the same sheet, that will end up in well.
We're just writing down ideas.
So what I want you to do is start with ideation. So what I want is just random ideas for marketing. So to get you started, we could, for example, we could try to rank for SEO. We could buy paid advertising on Google. We might run ads on Facebook, on Twitter. We might do influencing. We might get Kim Kardashian. We might get an ex-Bronco like Gordon Talos to do it. We might decide to do a takeover campaign. I don't know, give it away to people in nursing homes. Right? The idea is come up with as many crazy brands that you see marketing happen and put them all on a list, all down one side. Because then once you've got it, a piece of paper is easier if you want.
We're getting some paper, just hold.
So the idea of your ideation is you guys get right as much as you can. So I've given you guys like 7 ideas and keep going from there. Right? So, you know, anything you see there, TV ads, radio ads, let's do billboards, let's get street art, let's find situations where people go down sponsor the Queensland Lifesavers. You know, so just, you know, anything like that. Sure. Viral campaigns, YouTube, whatever it happens to be. Try to make them as simple as possible. So
Amazingly,
I just go, oh, YouTube.
since it helps with marine things, attractive male and female dolphins. With a blue bottle and a tank or something.
I think that's might be good because then you can actually see
For marine things as well. Well, we're releasing these in the Queen Street Mall.
Good. So you want it to be actionable, you want it to be really defined, right? So channels, heart attack things. You know, you can't just go TV ads. Like I want to kind of know what it's going to be, and just a little bit more than that. Like just the TV ads, not much. But if we're going to do TV ads on the block, because we're going to, yeah, you get the idea, right? Actual stuff.
So that's one idea.
Okay, yep.
Alright, so we're just going to go, so just make sure when you come up with ideas and you write on billboards, add just a bit more onto it. So I was going to say maybe just
Yeah, just wander around.
walk around.
Wander around as a
Well, just go to the table. Yeah, if you can do that, then you're fine. So if you stand this table here, just see if you can Ilma. Do you guys have any questions for the client, Ilma? Right? Remember, knowledge is a therapist. So no one's probably thinking that
Years research, it's totally natural.
Right.
It's,
So I did
we're
one.
not supposed to use safe, but it's baby friendly, pregnancy friendly. It can be used on any form of irritation of the skin, even though it was first researched for mosquitoes, sandflies and midges. So now if you've got an irritation caused by sea lice or you you've been burnt, first of all put it under cold water, then apply this and it cools it down. So if I pass it around, you can buy it online. It's approximately 500 applications. It's totally odorless.
maybe just commercial.
Oh! This safety.
What about pharmacy engagement now?
It's a water
It's one of the preservative.
There's a little bit of alcohol.
Yeah, preservative. It stops plant remedies. Second, really fit and bound, maybe by hand. You can actually take the top
First
off.
thing is make sure you've got a lot of ideas.
Because
Write down
it's
lots of
like
ideas.
medicine, then
If you're going
it's
to start scoring
technology,
them,
it works
then
quicker.
start to give.
Even though it works very nicely. I mean, that's why we promote it topically.
For example, if you convince me
We got,
to try the
I lived
product,
in Yamba, and the mosquitoes and sandflies come out 24/7. And I
whereas
put
the
an
confidence
advert
is
in the
going to do it
newspaper,
one
and
time,
people got bitten
and
and
it's
stuck
easy doing
for 2 years. And then we came up with a formula.
Did you do the research?
Whereas if you can get do something about it, you know the impact. It's going to be great. The confidence of getting her to do it and the ease of doing it is probably zero because it's going to cost $1 million. So that's the idea. So think about other things. So think about channels and think about what to do with them. So think YouTube, think Google, think Facebook. What are you going to put on it? So I'll give you like the other guys that said Google, the example I just ran through there, people will search for natural issues. So you go, okay, now you go work out scoring that. That's a nice baseline one. Could be huge. Does that make sense?
So in terms of school, so probably pretty low. To store the first thing. Like probably low, like the engagement is pretty high.
It is all potential impact, right?
Would go out.
So going back to the lifesaver stuff, going to the actual beach where people are being stung on a daily basis by blue bottles. So going out because the actual lifesavers do basic third stage.
So we could just make that first point about demonstration and put it
Yeah.
on York Street and then a beach.
Yeah.
And then maybe some other places where
It's going to actually have a
right?
practical thing, yeah.
The demonstration.
So if your kid's being stung by a blue bottle, yeah, then we can.
Beaches. And where else do we see these? Obviously, HK we're doing at enterprise level through that old school channel. Any other demonstration ideas where this could be?
What do you think?
Malls.
Oh yeah.
What I was thinking actually is that she's probably going to want a copy of all this shit.
Yeah. This is actually a superb product to test this on.
It's a bit of a goer to jump in there.
Yeah.
Impact. How much impact do you think this is going to have?
I think it would be really, how much on a scale of 1 to 10? Let's go as a group.
All right, sure. Yeah. 5,
6,
7.
5. I think a 7.
For which one? For which
The
idea?
first part.
Oh,
of
definitely.
Where we're demonstrating in real life.
7.
Definitely.
7? You're a 7?
Yeah, 7.
Confidence. I think consensus was around
Confidence
7.
in terms of how confident
How
are you
confident
that
are we that this will work?
Yeah,
Seven,
pretty
10.
7, yeah.
Oh, I got 5.
Okay, so bring the average down to 6.
There we go, 6, yeah.
By the way, are you Novembering, both of you?
Yeah, might as well.
No.
No?
This is my normal mark. How easy do we think it will be to implement? I think it's not.
Relatively quite easy. We should be able to hire people, put them out, put out
You
the
need to
signs.
hire a pop-up store.
We're assuming that there is no budgetary
It's not as
limitation here.
easy as running a Facebook campaign. You gotta
Yeah.
log in and set up some budgets, right?
Yeah.
Still a bit more difficult.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, it's just organizing people. We're a student city, we can hire students, but we'd probably need licenses.
I'd say 4.
Yeah, 4 or 5.
I'd give it a 5.
Oh, yeah, 5.
5 it is. All right, next one. I had USPs.
Yeah. Issues. This should probably just be like ads, posters, just stuff around town that is announced at TV, everything. Any kind of platform where you can emphasize the USPs.
Is it enough to just having the safety use, or do we still need some training?
Oh, it emphasizes the niche, which is that, it's natural, it works on everybody's skin type, etc., etc.
So,
And you live in Hotwood, so
ad post as in digital as well?
digital.
Sure, so when you walk out of Central Station here, just off the road,
Offline and digital.
you see a great big wobbling poster saying, come buy a mosquito today. Something snappy, I don't do marketing, and it's fixed.
Do we need to split this up then into digital and outdoor? Because it would be
Who do we
different,
think will be
difficult.
the adopters here? And do you think it will be younger people, older people?
Yeah, everybody. I think it's
I
used
think
by
it's
everybody.
everybody, right? And so we should maybe even just go with a 50-50 split and see where our demographic is and iteratively then readjust.
Not a copy, yeah? Okay, it's still one digital and one not, because it will be different.
What do you think?
I included this on a training today for product owners as a prioritization mechanism. We put an R on the front and called it RICE.
Oh yeah.
The first one is reach impact. So you can say, okay, given my target market, I think I can reach this much. Scale of 1 to 10. Again, 10 would be everyone.
Yeah.
And then impact, how strongly. But I
How
think
strong.
the impact you can kind of consolidate reach and impact together.
Yeah, I like the R.
True.
That's really good.
It makes sense,
actually.
yeah. And especially when you have a budget to work with, especially on digital channels, you can get an idea of what your reach will be like in actual numbers.
Like how much would it cost to put a poster outside Central Station versus going through Facebook and Instagram? If you're talking about reach.
Yeah.
Probably get more
You just
people.
look at the footfall,
Yeah.
right? And there's probably ABS stats on how many people use Central Station on any given day, and you multiply it times.
Hello, how you going? We're having a lot of fun.
Okay, can I introduce you to the product?
Sure.
So the product's called
YouTube ones like you put it in there and please outside Okay, start by doing each one. So remember, in each one of school, multiply them, add them together, sorry, divide by 3. Remember, ease is everything. All the resources required to do it. If it's going to take 20 developers, 6 months to do it, and $1 million in advertising, that's not easy. And high scoring is relative to your so you might score something as easy as 9, or 7, as long as it's relative to your sheet. Yeah. I'm all set with like they're like 90% of the time. When have you been with my theatre?
Yeah, I was about to say actually. Yeah. So what do you do? It's actually a viable option. We should totally get you on there.
Yeah, I mean, I
told you that 2 years. So I had a formula that actually worked. I know, I love it.
Supply chains, almost calls, advertising, and actually advertising it, so it's on chemists, we've got chemists, what's new in the warehouse?
Thanks for the USPs for safe to use digital. I don't know. 7, yeah. Confidence. Yeah, you run it. Come on, we've got to give you I reckon this will be more complex.
Soy sauce.
You don't want to constantly give them a small amount, you have the option.
Have you guys started to score stuff?
Let's get back to that. Again, so scoring.
You can do it on your run on these one. So, see, this is one. Three numbers, this sort of space and then total at the end. So what's this one?
So this is Woolworths Coles Flash.
Okay, so impact. Confidence. In there, right? 9 plus 1 is 19 divided by 3, its total score is 6.3. Right? That is your I score out of 10.
Yep.
It's not bad, but it's easy to put it down so you can see what's happening. Right, let's look at another one.
Okay, Facebook information.
Right, okay.
Impact.
It's all relative between them. Obviously not all words, so confidence isn't working. Maybe 3. It's going to be a group not yet. So, that's divided by 3 is 3. 7, 15 divided by 3 is 5. Right. So, smash through, let's get a few of those done. And then just put them in order. So you go to the highest, lowest score.